Judea, a country once its own independent kingdom, was reduced to a province of first the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great, and later by one of its successor states, the Seleucid Empire. Judea's people, most of whom were Jews, both native-born and converts, owed loyalty to the descendants of Seleucus Nestor, one of Alexander the Great's friends and generals, who, following his death in 323 BC, carved out for himself and his heirs a slice of Alexander's vast empire, covering what is now modern Syria, Israel, Jordan, and Iraq. For the most part, the Seleucid kings allowed the Judeans to go about their lives in peace, keeping their own religion and customs so long as they paid tribute to the king, and the Judeans had no problems doing so since their rights were respected. Greek people, culture, and religion slowly made their way into the country, some Jews opposing them as corrupting influences, some seeing them as having both good and bad qualities, and others, the most liberal, welcomed them warmly, adopting Greek religious practices, creating Hellenistic Judaism, a fusion of Jewish and Greek religion, where the Jews who practiced it worshipped the God of Israel as the highest god and Zeus, and the Olympians as lower gods. For 2 centuries, Judea knew peace, the Greeks, who ruled them, respecting their rights and religious freedom, but things changed for the worst in 167 BC, when the Seleucid king, Antiochus IV, determined that it was no longer good enough that traditional Jews tolerated Hellenistic Judaism and polytheism in general in their land now. The king decreed they needed to allow statues of Zeus, and even the king himself, to be placed in the temple in Jerusalem. Centuries back, during the time of Solomon and several of his successors, it had been common to see other gods and goddesses honored in the temple, as most Jews were polytheists, but over time, particularly after the Babylonian exile, Judaism turned to monotheism, believing in only one God. And while there was always a minority of Jews who clung to polytheism, the vast majority became monotheistic, and thus the temple changed from being a temple devoted to many deities to just one Jehovah, the high God of Israel. To the traditional Jews in 167 BC, what Antiochus asked wasn't just outlandish, it was heresy punishable by death, and the king knew this very well. He knew traditional Jews would never put up with this outright insult to their God, so he sidestepped them. The temple had its own order of priests, known as the Levites, all descended from the tribe of Levi. Named after their ancestor Levi, the son of Jacob and Leah, no other Israelite tribe was allowed to govern the temple save for the Levites, this order being established during Solomon's reign, when Zadok, a descendant of the first high priest, Aaron, the elder brother of Moses, was able to persuade the king that only his tribe should be able to run the temple, and that only the descendants of Aaron could be high priests. And from that time on, that's how it went. Levites guarding and keeping the temple, and a descendant of Aaron and Zadok overseeing them as the head priest. All the priests in the temple in 167 BC were staunch monotheists, and would not, under any circumstances, allow the king to desecrate God's holy sanctuary with images of other gods, and certainly not his own statues. To get around this, Antiochus, without much thought, dismissed the entire priestly class and banished them from entering the temple again. In their place, he chose Jews who practiced Hellenistic Judaism to take up the Levite duties. For the position of high priest, the king chose a man unrelated to the descendants of Aaron from the tribe of Benjamin, named Menelaus. The appointment of Menelaus to the position of high priest caused outrage among the Levites and the traditional Jewish community at large, and they refused to recognize him or the other new priests. Antiochus, unfazed, sent an officer named Sostrates with an army of men to force the Jews in Jerusalem to submit to this new decree. But they wouldn't. The resistance didn't last long. Sostrates and his men overran Jerusalem's defenders in a matter of days, slaughtering their way to the temple, taking whatever gold and silver they found, and left Menelaus and his fellow Benjamites as the new caretakers of the sanctuary. Soon after the siege and slaughter in Jerusalem, Antiochus gave a new decree to Judea. There was to be no more polytheist or monotheist, Hellenized Jew or traditional Jew. Now, he stated, all were to be one people. No more division. While it may sound natural to modern ears to say one country, one people, to the traditional Jews this was another attack on their identity and religion. They tried to be accommodating, looking the other way while their friends and neighbors worshipped other gods and indulged in foreign practices. They welcomed Greek and other ethnic groups into their lands without complaint, all for nothing, apparently, as the king demanded they give up who they were and forsake the ways of their ancestors. For one Levite priest, a descendant of Aaron and Zadok, the Greeks had gone too far this time. Matthias was from rural Judea, hailing from the village of Modein in the central region of the country. Like many traditional Jews, he had been accepting of Hellenistic Judaism as a different path than his own, but slowly came to despise what was happening to Judaism and its people. And his anger was stoked even more when in time the king shut down traditional ceremonies within the temple in an attempt to squash traditional Jewish practices.